All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know that was not a very long break, and that last panel was just really engaging and exciting. We appreciate you all hanging around. We're going to shift gears from gene therapy to endocrinology. I think this is an incredibly important topic area to dig into today. So we've got some wonderful speakers, including some doctors, some psychologists. We've got somebody living with Duchenne to provide their perspectives on puberty and the impact of testosterone across the lifespan and across different processes. So I think that this is going to be a really great and robust discussion. And with that, I would love to introduce Dr. Nora Renthal, who is an endocrinologist at Boston Children's Hospital, who also does quite a bit of research in the area of puberty and development. And I'm just really looking forward to hearing from what you all have to say. So without further ado, Dr. Nora Renthal.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I had hoped to see more faces, so hopefully people will trickle in, and we'll go from there. So, as Rachel said, I'm Nora Renthal. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at Boston Children's Hospital with a specific focus on puberty, gender, and sexual wellness for individuals living with disability. I'm really thrilled to be here today, serving to moderate this highly accomplished panel. I think we can all recognize that adolescence represents a pivotal stage in a person's development. Our teen years are characterized by significant physical and cognitive growth, as well as a profound journey of self-discovery and increasing autonomy. During this transformative period, the body and brain undergo remarkable changes, largely influenced by our hormones. Adolescence marks a time of maturation and self-realization as individuals gradually navigate their path toward independence. This period represents opportunities for personal growth, exploration of identity, and the formation of meaningful relationships. It is essential to acknowledge the significant role that hormones play in driving the transformations that occur during adolescence. Hormonal changes, including the rise of sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, these contribute to the physical maturation of the body and the development of the brain. Understanding the importance of hormones to adolescent development is vital for medical providers and for educators and for parents, and critically for a young person's sense of self. By recognizing the unique challenges and opportunities presented during this phase of development, we have the opportunity to create supportive environments that foster healthy growth and emotional well-being. Empowering adolescents to navigate this transformative period with knowledge, guidance, and encouragement will enable them to thrive and reach their full potential as they transition into adulthood. Today we have 3 experts to educate us today on the biology, the psychology, and the lived experiences of the hormone testosterone. Dr. Weber, Dr. Truba, and our own esteemed Colin Werth. Dr. Weber is a pediatric endocrinologist and bone health specialist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He has been an attending in the multidisciplinary DMD clinic for over 10 years. Dr. Truba has a PhD in clinical psychology and works at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. She specializes in the psychological well-being and behavioral health of children with complex medical conditions. Colin Werth has a degree in information technology and works as an IT specialist for Virginia-based letterpress communications. He is a strong patient advocate for the Duchenne and rare disease community and has been an active member of PPMD since 2016. Colin currently serves as our president of the PPMD Adult Advisory Committee. Today, our discussion will focus on puberty and the experience of needing testosterone therapy, which is a common side effect of glucocorticoids. We'll begin with an overview by Dr. Weber.
Thank you, Dr. Renthal, and thank you for having me. I've been coming to scientific meetings in the DMD space for many years, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you all. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about delayed puberty today. So first and foremost, I'd just like to say, as an endocrinologist, I think this is one of the things that we can really do to help your kids, help you the most, and I think really gives us a lot of satisfaction in being able to help with puberty. So for my outline today, I want to start by just giving a brief introduction to endocrinology. I don't want to assume that everyone here has met an endocrinologist or has seen an endocrinologist, so we'll talk a bit about that. And then I framed my talk about some questions I thought you might all have about puberty. So first, what is puberty? Why is it important? Why is puberty delayed in people with DMD? How and why do we treat delayed puberty? And what to expect with the treatment of delayed puberty. We're going to mostly be talking about typical male puberty with testosterone, but certainly we want to acknowledge that there are some people who are females, born females, who are affected and take steroids, and there are some of our patients who are born male but identify as females. And for those people, that's really estrogen, and so I'm going to briefly talk about female puberty and what treatment would look like for those people as well. All right, so what is an endocrinologist, you might be thinking, or why do I need to see yet another doctor? I get that question sometimes in clinic, and that's perfectly fine. So endocrinology is the study of hormones. What is a hormone? Okay, so hormones are substances that are made by the body, and they really just keep us healthy. They help regulate all sorts of important things like growth, and energy, and mood, and stress, blood sugar, and more. Are hormones affected by DMD? So the answer to this is yes, but really only in people with DMD who are on high-dose steroids. So most of our talk is going to be for people who are treated with the high doses of prednisone and deflazacort and other steroids that are standard of care. All right, so there's a lot of different hormones in the body. Let's talk through the ones that are affected by steroids. So first, in our graph here, the middle of the graph, or the middle of this figure, is what's called the pituitary gland. It's a part of the brain that regulates most of the hormones in the body. And it secretes a hormone called ACTH that controls a stress hormone in the body. And when you take steroids, the secretion of that hormone is low, and so there's a decrease in the amount of stress hormone that's made. There's also a decrease in the production of growth hormone, which is one of the reasons why growth slows after starting steroids. Steroids weaken the bones and can lead to fractures or a condition called osteoporosis. And then finally, for the main purpose of today's talk, the steroids limit the secretion of the hormones called FSH and LH, which we'll talk about more, and this can lead to delayed or even absent puberty. All right, so what to expect at the endocrine visit? So we're really going to do our best to get a good height and a good weight measurement. This may mean getting out of your wheelchair to get good weights. It's really important for us to follow these measures. And then we're going to ask some questions. Some of these questions are going to be kind of typical medical questions you're used to. We're going to ask about the steroid history, ask about other medications you might be taking, and then we're going to ask some things about your diet, what you eat. Tell us about your physical activity, what kind of things do you do, and then we're going to ask questions about adrenal insufficiency and bone health. And then we get into some of the awkward parts of the endocrine evaluation. And so right when you meet us, we're going to start by doing some exams of the genitals or your private parts. And we're going to ask questions, especially as you get older, about things like mood and energy level. We may ask about gender identity and sex and sexuality and sexual function. In many cases, we're actually going to ask the parents to leave the room for some of these conversations. That's not going to happen right away at that first visit, but as you or your kids get up to that 10, 11, 12 age, we really want to start to develop an independent relationship with them. Importantly, for the patients in the room here, the kids in the room, and for the adults, if you're not comfortable being alone with a doctor for a physical exam or these sorts of questions, you can always ask for a chaperone. So that's someone like a nurse or a medical assistant who can be there in the room with you. All right, so let's get into the meat here. So what is puberty? Dr. Renthal gave a definition. I have a slightly different one here that's just I found from the NIH that I thought is pretty good. It's the time of life when a child experiences physical, mental, and hormonal changes that mark a transition into adulthood. The child develops secondary sexual characteristics and becomes able to have children. And for our purposes, let's think about what the secondary sexual characteristics are. So these are all the signs of puberty that you're familiar with. So it's going to be the development of pubic hair, and for males, it's going to be the facial hair, the chest. Everyone will get the under armpit hair. For males, you're going to see that deepening of the voice. You're going to see growth of the penis and testicles if you're a boy, and for girls, that's going to be breast growth. And so how does it work? So for typical males, most guys will start puberty between the age of 9 and 14. It all starts with a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus makes a hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH. That hormone works on that part of the brain I mentioned earlier, the pituitary gland. And the pituitary makes two hormones, luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicular stimulating hormone, FSH. And these are the hormones that then signal to the gonads. So in males, that's the testes or the testicles, and they're going to stimulate the production of testosterone and then also cause maturation of sperm so that one day you'll be able to conceive a child. Female puberty is a little bit different. It starts a little bit earlier, so most girls will start between 8 and 12. Hypothalamus, pituitary, these hormones are all the same. The gonads, of course, are different. So we're talking about ovaries in this situation and the production of estradiol, the female hormone, and then also preparing those ovaries to ovulate. So why is puberty important? So we think about some of the physical health aspects of puberty. So as a bone health doctor, we're super important to think about strengthening those bones. And so both estrogen and testosterone makes the bones stronger. Both of these hormones support muscle and heart health, and they also will lead to that pubertal growth spurt, so you'll typically see some growth during this time. And then I think perhaps not quite as well recognized is the importance of puberty on brain development. The sex steroids are really critical for that last part of childhood brain development, and this is that phase that you notice with your kids turning into adults when suddenly they're able to organize things better. They're able to think a bit more logically, and these hormones really just help get all that process done. Some functional considerations. If you're someone who has to urinate while sitting and uses a urinal, it can be challenging with a small penis. So testosterone is going to make the penis grow, and it's going to make that easier. And then finally, it's going to help with sexual and reproductive health. So sexual activity, of course, is a normal part of being a healthy adult, and testosterone and estrogen are going to promote that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, are necessary for fertility. So what happens to puberty in people with DMD? Important to remember that puberty itself is not affected by Duchenne, but as I mentioned, it's affected by the steroids. So what happens here is the steroids, and this is true whether it's prednisone or deflazacort that you're taking, is going to block the release of those hormones I mentioned earlier. So you're going to have lower GnRH, lower LH, and lower FSH. And this means that there isn't going to be that trigger to stimulate the production of testosterone or estrogen. How do we diagnose this? Well, the first part is actually going to be based on our physical exam. And so we're actually, when we're doing that examination of the private parts, we're looking at the testicular volume. You may see these beads. These are not some sort of funny necklace or bracelet. We actually use these to get an estimate of the size of the testicles. And when we think of puberty versus not puberty, once the testicles are over 4 milliliters in size, as you can see on the beads there, that's the typical definition of starting puberty. Oftentimes we're going to check blood work as well. This is an important thing. These labs always need to be done first thing in the morning. That's the best time to check your hormone levels. And we're going to check the levels of testosterone, of LH, of FSH. We might get an x-ray of the hand. This is something called a bone age. What we're looking at here is actually at the growth plates, and those are the little areas at the end of the bones there, the little black bars. And what this allows us to do is see how the skeleton is maturing compared to what we would expect for someone of that age. The good news is that delayed puberty can be treated. And we do that by giving back testosterone for our males. There's lots of different ways to do this. Your endocrinologist is going to have their own approach, and there's many different right ways to do it. Most of us will likely start by giving testosterone through an injection or a shot. Typically, this is done into the muscle about every 4 weeks, so starting once a month. And then as time goes on and as the doses increase, that may change to be given every 1 to 2 weeks. These injections can be given by a nurse in your doctor's office. Certainly parents, caregivers, even the children themselves can learn to do these injections at home. There are some other products out there. There's testosterone gels that we sometimes use in pediatrics. These are a benefit because they don't have the needle. There's an example of a gel pump there. The downside of these is they have to be given every day. And the other downside is that the testosterone does get onto things like towels and clothes. And that is potentially a risk to any female caregivers. So any testosterone that's transferred from that clothing to a mom or to a female caregiver is actually going to result in some of those male-looking physical characteristics. So we have to be very careful about that. And then once you move on to the adult world over 18, there's some other options out there. There's actually testosterone pills, there's testosterone patches, and then there's little pellets that can be actually implanted into the arm. So lots of different options for the adult endocrinologist. Briefly, just want to talk about delayed puberty in females again. So in this case, we're talking about replacing estrogen. This is typically done with a skin patch or with a pill. And then if you are a female who has a uterus, this may mean also taking another hormone called progesterone to help with uterine protection. All right, so the big point of treating puberty, I think the take-home message is we want to start low and go slow. So we're going to start at low doses of our hormones and work our way up. And the reason to do this is that we want to really mimic how puberty typically happens on its own. And by doing so, we're going to reduce some of those side effects and reduce some of those mood swings. And then we're going to adjust our doses. We're going to do that, number one, by looking at levels of the hormones in the blood, looking at the testosterone levels. And then we're going to ask about how it's going. So really want your kids to be honest with us about how they're feeling about energy level, about moods, about thoughts about sex and sexuality and sexual function. All of these things are going to help us know when and how to adjust the doses. Another thing that's important to remember is that testosterone levels vary tremendously. So what I've put up here is the reference range at our hospital for adult males, and you can see that a testosterone range anywhere between 264 and 916 can be considered normal. So what that means is it gives us a lot of ability to individualize our testosterone goals based on the individual boy that we are treating. The good news is that testosterone is usually very well tolerated, very minimal side effects. The side effects we do see are typically related to how it is given. So as with any injection, there can be bleeding and bruising and some pain at that needle site. And there's a chance of getting a rash either to the injection medicine or to the gel. A rare side effect that we're going to monitor for is for high blood counts. So in some people who take higher doses of testosterone, you can see an increase in the number of platelets and the number of red blood cells in the blood. And so we might check these labs once or twice a year just to keep an eye on that. And then there's the signs of puberty. So these are not actually side effects. This is what we are expecting. So some of them are not pleasant. We are going to see some pimples. We're going to see some body odor. Might see some mood swings. Also going to notice some of that increased libido, and that's that interest in sex drive and sexual activity. One important thing to remember about taking testosterone is that even though the penis is going to get bigger, the testicles are going to stay small. So that's one thing that's a bit different about going through puberty on your own. In most cases, we think that delayed puberty should be treated. Many of you probably are familiar with the care considerations, that paper that sort of describes the minimum standard of care for the treatment of people with Duchenne. They recommend treating delayed puberty by age 12 to 14 in people with DMD. And the reason for that is we as endocrinologists and the broader field really just think that the benefits of testosterone on the physical and the mental health far outweigh the risks. Important to remember though, testosterone is not for everyone. One group of people that this comes up for is some of our patients with DMD who maybe have some developmental differences, some cognitive issues, autism spectrum. In those cases, I still think, and many of us still think, that starting puberty is probably appropriate. It's going to be a discussion about how to do so. One of the things that we can do is give lower doses of testosterone, and that'll still give us some of the physical benefits on the bone health and the muscle and the heart health, but maybe not get that full sex drive and some of those other things that come along with higher doses. And then, of course, if you're someone who identifies as a female or a gender other than male, then testosterone is not right for you. Important to talk to your doctor about that. How long will testosterone treatment be needed? This is a great question, and we don't know yet for people with DMD. Some people probably can stop treatment after they get up to puberty, and the reason for that is testosterone will actually trigger the brain to start making these hormones. The limited studies that we have from a research standpoint suggest that about 50% or about half of boys on testosterone will need to stay on testosterone to maintain normal testosterone levels as long as they're on high-dose steroids. But really, this is going to be an individualized discussion about whether we want to try coming off and seeing how the body responds or just stay on therapy. All right, starting puberty is going to bring on some of these thoughts about sex and sexuality and relationships. Important to remember this is healthy and this is what we expect. Sexual education is important for everyone. Topics such as online safety, consent, both giving and getting consent for sexual activity, sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy prevention, and there are some practical matters, of course, that come up as well for people with physical differences. We'll talk some more about these later in the session. Again, if you have questions about any of these things, they're all fair game for your endocrinologist and for your care team. Just bring them up to us. Starting puberty sometimes brings on thoughts about gender identity. Remembering that sex is determined at birth by the genes or the chromosomes we have. Someone with an X and a Y chromosome is a typical male. Somebody with two X chromosomes is a typical female. There are some other combinations as well. Gender, by contrast, is how a person feels as male, female, neither, both, something else. Sex and gender line up for most people. For others, they don't, and that's okay. The physical changes of puberty sometimes trigger those thoughts, some trigger some discomfort. So if you're thinking or your child is thinking that maybe they're not feeling male before starting, or maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable with some of these changes after they start, again, bring it up to your doctor. Lastly, just want to touch briefly on fertility. Of course, people with DMD can have children. This can be done biologically, the typical way of producing sperm to fertilize an egg, also through adoption. There's really not a lot of studies or research on fertility in people with DMD. I think most of us as pediatric endocrinologists probably think that if you remain on or your child remains on steroids as an adult and is trying to have a child, they may need some help from a reproductive endocrinologist to try to give some extra hormones to stimulate sperm production. These are typical things. Certainly there's a lot of help out there for this. And then to the best of our knowledge, testosterone treatment during childhood does not cause infertility and really shouldn't impact ability to have children later on in life. So lastly, then, to conclude, puberty is a natural life stage. It's important for physical, cognitive, and emotional health into adulthood. Most people with DMD on the classic steroid regimens are going to need help starting and maintaining puberty. One thing I really want to advocate is to try to meet with a pediatric endocrinologist well before the time of puberty so that your child can start to develop a relationship with that doctor, and it's just going to make it much easier to have these conversations, which can be a little bit awkward. And I'm going to hand it off to the rest of the team here. My email is there. Always happy to field any questions related to endocrine, puberty, other bone health issues, so feel free to email me. Thank you.
Am I turned on? Is mine? Okay, great. We need to transfer the clicker to Colin, if we could. So next up, we have Colin Werth, who's going to speak about his personal experience with delayed puberty and the decision to treat with testosterone. Take it away.
Thank you, and thank you to Dr. Weber for that excellent overview. So I was going to talk about some of what he had to say, I just was going to kind of talk about as well, but so I won't go over that in as much detail, but really I also just wanted to tell my story about my experience with needing testosterone replacement therapy. So I might as well start a bit of an introduction. I'm a 28-year-old with Duchenne, so been on this journey for a long time and been on steroid or testosterone therapy for around 10 years now, since 18. So, and throughout my presentation, I'm just going to show pictures as I've gone through puberty, what that's been like and changes there. So before getting to starting the testosterone therapy, a bit of a background. So I started taking steroids at age 9 in 2004, and in 2015, or at age 15 in 2010. Still hadn't really gone through puberty, unfortunately, because been on steroids for 6 years by then. So, yeah, unfortunately, no usual signs of puberty, like the my voice was still pretty high, and hadn't really started growing any facial hair, so definitely looked younger, even though I was 18, definitely looked younger. Well, here in 2011 at age 16, look a lot younger than 16, a high schooler. So yeah, a lot of that can definitely affect self-esteem issues, and just because of that, not looking and sounding like your age. Unfortunately, even with the, I mean, I still look younger, and actually on the way here, the TSA agent still thought I was a high schooler, but and obviously I'm 28, so, but still have to deal with that, but that's life. So, and yeah, so my journey on that testosterone, as I said, started in around 17 years of age. So, and one thing to mention, I'm obviously, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but one thing that if you're interested in doing growth hormone, this should be done before taking the testosterone, because the testosterone fuses the growth plates and prevents further growth. So I guess Dr. Weber and Dr. Renthal can talk about that more if you have questions there. Yeah, so started testosterone in 2012, so that's almost 18 years of age, so definitely very late compared to standard puberty without being delayed. So I've had experience with multiple forms, getting multiple forms of the testosterone, but started with injections, as Dr. Weber mentioned you often do, and started with that monthly, and then so I was on that for around 3 years, and then I can't remember exactly when I started, but around 2015 I started bi-weekly, and then another 3 years, and then eventually seemed to be, I was struggling a bit with the, not that the shots were hard to do, but unfortunately with the biweekly dosing, there could be testosterone levels can fluctuate. Obviously, right after injections can get higher levels, but it can start to wane by the time the next shot is coming up. So with the patches and the gel, there is, it's a daily dosing, so more consistent levels, so or less of the fluctuation, which I mean can be frustrating to deal with. And I also did do the patches for a few months, and unfortunately did have skin irritation from that, and then started with gel, which I'm still on to this day. So, and yeah, here's a picture of me in 2013. So still looking pretty young, early stages or pre-puberty there. So yeah, and then just here's pictures. So probably around 2015 or right after, you see 2016, I'm still looking pretty young there. And then probably around that time, did start eventually growing some of a beard, started shaving regularly. So, and then you see 2019, definitely. I couldn't find it in 2017. I tried to grow out long beard, but yeah, just definitely looking older around 2019 and 2022. A year ago, definitely looking a lot older, and now here today. But so wanted to little change subject here. Misconceptions. Yeah, I know there's a lot of can be hesitation from parents for starting puberty. You think, oh, my son's going to become a grumpy teenager, moody, but as Dr. Weber mentioned, and a lot of my friends, fellow DMD friends, will agree, testosterone really helps improve self-esteem. And then, as I mentioned, far as the age, looking a lot longer and sounding a lot younger than you really are, that can really hurt your self-esteem. And also just, yeah, I mean, it's a natural sex hormone. It's not like I guess I've been trying to think of ways to compare its importance, but basically, yeah, it's not a synthetic drug. It's a natural hormone. It's safe, and also, I mean, there are risks from having low levels of testosterone with as far as bone and muscle health, but as well, even definitely has impacts on mood itself. And as you know, even in older men can have depression from low testosterone levels with aging, but obviously that's different for us being young adults, but still importance there. And also, one thing to mention, that testosterone does not change sexual orientation unless you're a transgender male, obviously. But yeah, again, it's a safe, normal thing to have sexual thoughts, sexual libido. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a stigma about this. We were talking about this with the group of young adults earlier. Me and a few of the panelists had a good discussion about this, not being uncomfortable about sexual thoughts and sex itself. So yeah, but yeah, testosterone generally in males does not affect your sexual identity. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that. So Dr. Weber gave an overview of these different treatment options that I kind of just wanted to share. I've already talked about this already, but some of the different treatment options, these are the only ones I've dealt with. I haven't dealt with pills or whatever, the implants. So yeah, so I've dealt with the injections, as I said, the patches, and the gel. So here's just some pros and cons here. So with the injections, it's pretty easy to do. I actually had my father was able to do injections at home for me. And there's limited external contact. So if you're worried about passing along to female caregivers or female siblings. But obviously there's, I already talked about the levels fluctuating, and it's a needle, so. And then to move on to the patches and the gel, obviously no needles, not as many fluctuations. Patches are easy to apply. Unfortunately, skin irritation, and you have to take the patch off if you're going in and say a cardiac MRI. But I mean, that's not a huge deal. And the gel, which I'm on currently. Yeah, again, no needles. It's easy to apply. And I mean, you still, like if my dad is out traveling, my mom can put the testosterone. Just recommend you obviously use gloves to help prevent transfer. Yeah, so, and it can be skin irritation, but not as bad as the patches, which are something covering your skin, not allowing it to breathe, but the gels, alcohol-based gel that just dries pretty quickly in 5-10 minutes. So, yeah, that's just my experience with these. So I haven't had experience with the other tablets and implants. So yeah, definitely talk to your endocrinologist about this. So yeah, I just had a really just a quick presentation slide since Dr. Weber again gave a great overview. Yeah, just thank you to you, Dr. Weber, Dr. Renthal, and yeah, and just wanted to give a shout out to the endocrinologists that I've seen for my care, especially Dr. Mylan Rudder was really instrumental in helping with the process of me going through puberty. So yeah, just a big thank you. And then as well, eventually switched my care to Duke, another Dr. Weber, funny enough, and my current doctor, Dr. Thomas at VCU in Richmond, all great doctors. And I guess one thing I'll say, I'm sure some of us have run into endocrinologists that may not be familiar with Duchenne. I've experienced that myself, so definitely, but glad to know there are definitely experts out there, and I'm sure the doctors here are definitely able to talk to and educate if you have a local endocrinologist that may not be as familiar. Yeah, and thank you to PPMD, and thank you to all of you for being here, and especially been enjoying the PAC sessions. Glad to see we have around 30 young adults here, so been some great discussions here. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it off.
Awesome. So next we have Dr. Truba.
I have to say, this is the first neuromuscular conference I've attended where endocrinologists have got a straight up shout out, so that's awesome. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to talk about the social impacts of delayed puberty, and a lot of these, what we have talked about, I'm going to repeat, so some things I'll go through quickly. But if you've ever seen me talk, you know that sometimes when I'm given a platform, I'm going to talk about things that I think are important. So I'm going to move a little bit away from just talking solely about testosterone and puberty and those things, but really about how it impacts us as humans. And at the end of the day, there are peer-based impacts when you have delayed puberty. Impacts how you might develop friendships or intimate relationships or peer relationships because of how people perceive you. Like Colin's story, which I think was great, him sharing that looking younger than you are impacts people's perceptions of you, right? Which impacts your ability to build social status, right? If you're perceived younger and you're not included in things, you're othered and you're in this out group. And there's so much natural conversation and talking about sexuality and those locker room type of things that happen in those spaces that if you're not included in are really putting you at a disadvantage. And then there's a higher risk of bullying, right? Because if you don't have a good protective friend group, that's one of the best ways to protect against bullying, especially when you have a physical disability. And so that's like a triple whammy, right? Then we have these individual-based sort of impacts. And everyone's different, right? So this might not apply to everybody. But in general, there's going to be a higher likelihood of internalizing experiences, right? Which this is, I am smaller, so I'm less of a man. I'm seeing this as a quality that's related to me and not a side effect of being on steroids. And that can mess with your mental. And that's really, really hard when you're a child to kind of wrap your mind around. And I hear this statement all the time. I'm smaller than my peers, so I'm not a real man. And that breaks my heart, right? Because one, that's just a messed up definition of being a man, that you have to be big and strong. Actually, I think that's kind of scary. So it's, maybe small men are great. But that's the belief, right? From a side effect of something we make them take to keep them safe. And that's going to shape self-identity, self-perception, self-esteem, your beliefs about what you're capable of, what your capacity is, right? If you are uncomfortable, if you don't perceive people as wanting you in a space, if you don't have that opportunity, that's going to impact your willingness to take social risks that you need to build friendships and to talk to people that you're attracted to, or to put yourself out there to kind of develop some of these skill sets, social skill sets that we need going into adulthood. And that's going to contribute to things like our experiences of social anxiety, right? And so any of you younger people in the room, what you'll learn when you get older is that nobody was thinking about you like you thought they were when you were younger. They were doing the same thing you're doing. They're thinking about themselves, right? That's really hard to get a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old to understand, right? That people are not thinking about you as much as you are. And that's going to impact our behavior, because what do we do when we're uncomfortable or when we're afraid? We avoid, right? And when we avoid, we make things worse. But really the biggest impact that we see is our impact on our sexual identity, our sexuality, our sexual health sort of behaviors. So this is more about the importance of things we miss out on. So when we delay puberty, we miss out on the natural progression of how kids, our peers around us, are developing libido, understanding libido in a developmentally scaffolded way, and learning to navigate that. And so when we start that later in life, we've missed out on a chunk, right? And we're playing catch up now, right? And developing a libido is so important. None of us would be here in this room if somebody in our lives before us didn't have a libido, okay? Right? So super, super important. Everybody's having sex. There wouldn't be a population if we didn't engage in sexual activities. It's healthy, it's expected, it's part of growing up, and we need to normalize it in this community. So how do we do that? How do we then talk about and manage our sexual desires and urges, especially if we are going to be in a position where we're delaying puberty and then starting puberty a little bit later? Then that's on us. That's on you guys as parents to help them navigate that. That's on us as providers. So that's us in a community, right? Because we're putting them at a disadvantage, and then we need to make that gap up. So we need to talk about it, okay? We need to normalize it. We need to normalize part of being human. We need to start talking about masturbation. How are we masturbating as our body gets harder to use, as our arms get weak, as our hands get weak? How do we have this conversation normalized in our family so it doesn't feel uncomfortable and weird? If I'm the primary caregiver and I'm a parent, and I'm a protective mama bear parent, I don't want anyone else taking care of my kid either, then you gotta be having these conversations, because it's part of growing up. And it's an uncomfortable conversation for anybody. I don't care if you have muscle dystrophy or not, talking about sex with your parents is super uncomfortable. My mom used to do it when we were driving in the car and I couldn't escape and I hated it. But find a way. Oh, another mom that does that. There you go. Identify the challenges, right? Like related to masturbation, related to sexual urges, related to talking to people that we're attracted to, however that might be, how we see ourselves, what is our identity, how do we feel about our bodies. We need to talk about it. We need to work together to find creative solutions and ways that we address it, right? Because it's just as important as any other parenting job. And it's funny, we were all joking and talking about how we learned about sex, and some of us are like, oh yeah, our parents talked about it all the time, and others of us are, our parents never talked about it, right? And what a wild thing to not talk about as a parent. Right, Dr. Nora was saying, my parents taught me to drive. They taught me sex ed. They taught me, how to manage my money. It was just, part of growing up. But we don't feel that often, and we need to. We need to start to talk about these things, y'all. It impacts, and we need to have a better conversation around dating and intimacy, right? Because what we're dealing with are beliefs about how others see us, and the reality of how others see us, and that is a real reality that these men face. If you look younger, that does make people uncomfortable, right? I have had men who've had really hard times with dating because people perceive them and they look very young, and they're nervous to be dating somebody that people are gonna see them as dating a child, and they're like, I don't want people to think I'm a pedophile because I'm dating somebody that looks so young. And I didn't have to navigate that growing up, right? So we need to prepare and talk about and work through how we're gonna do this, if we're gonna do it, right? As we're raising our children. And we need to acknowledge, we need to help them develop strategies for navigating these things, especially if they're missing those naturalistic opportunities to talk to their peers and learn from their peers. Because honestly, dating isn't easy for anybody. And I can't tell you how many men that come to therapy because they struggle with dating, and I'm like, my dude, dating is hard and savage and welcome to an adulthood. This is just rough, right? I don't know anybody that's dating is super easy and fun and I'm 100% successful. It doesn't exist. It's even harder with Duchenne and Becker, right? Because there are changes, there are things you have to navigate differently. How do you stay safe with a sexual partner when you have fragile bones, right? There's a lot that goes into this that we need to talk and teach so that they can navigate these things healthily, adaptively, and in a way that promotes, the fun things about being a human. Sex is great, right? Why would we want to keep a population of individuals from experiencing that thing, right? We don't. Intimacy, partnership is wonderful. We all need that. So my brief recommendations are you got to talk about these elephants in your child's social life, okay? We got to approach it how you would for any other adolescent or young adult. If you have other kids and you're doing it with them and you're not doing it with your DMD kid, that is not okay, all right? Be the adult that you wish you had when you were going in adolescence, okay? Think back, what would have been a helpful adult, right? Be that person. Normalize their experiences and approach it in a way that scaffolds so that we can develop and cultivate healthy mindsets, healthy behaviors, healthy ways of thinking about intimacy and dating and sexuality. And sometimes a part of this is we have to challenge beliefs and perceptions about dating, right? I had a young man I was working with not too long ago, and he was really getting down because he had using some dating apps and he'd been doing it for 2 months, and he's like, yeah, and I just don't think, I don't think it's for me. Never left his house in 2 months. And I was like, 2 months? That's nothing. We're talking a long time here. And he just didn't know. He just thought you just got on a dating app and just start dating. I'm like, oh no. So we have to talk about and make sure our expectations are reasonable, right? And achievable. And they need to start to develop the abilities to manage their own health, right? They need to be talking to their providers. You need to leave the room, right? Not just when you're asked, but proactively, I'm gonna leave, and you talk to them about what you need to talk about, and if they don't, they don't, right? But not being do you wanna talk about anything that you want me to leave the room? Just be I'm gonna leave the room, okay? Thank you.
Super, that was fabulous. And I'm really glad to see that we welcomed more faces over the last hour. I thought if we advertised a talk about testosterone, the room would be packed. But certainly, I think you all have appreciated the importance of this topic. I know there must be questions from the audience. I'd like to welcome you to come to the microphones on either side of the auditorium here. That would be so great. I see someone on the way, so I won't ask my backup question. Yes.
Hey, so I'm not scared, but like, thank you so much for that conversation about like human sexuality, right? Like, and how like the hormones affect your state of mind. Like, you're right, it is sort of the elephant in the room. Like, my Duchenne dude is the youngest of 5 kids. You know, we've done the car conversation, like, and you can feel them kind of go, you know, and they get a little weird. And I'm like, are you full right now? And they're like, yeah, you know. And then we'll circle back around. And so what I tried to get my folks to understand, which maybe will be helpful for some of you, is this is what I want you to remember, kiddo. Like, first of all, you can ask me anything. I'm never going to make you feel shame about it. I'm not going to make you feel weird. I will always know more than your friends, right? And you can trust me to be gentle with this weird feeling that you have, right? And if you can't trust me with this, then we've got a really big problem, right? Because then when they get in trouble or they're feeling some kind of way, then they can't come to me with all of their stuff, right? You know, one of the many TED Talks in my brain is, you know, if you want to be friends with your adult kids, you treat them like your adult friends. And there's a lot to unpack with that, but I firmly believe that we have this sort of intersection of power structure between, you know, having these little tiny people and all of this parental power, and at some point it's going to shift, right? I'm an end-of-life researcher, so I look at like where does that happen and how do we end up dealing with end-of-life issues, which gets really complicated when parents and children aren't really friends. And I really think we could have this long, beautiful plateau of equanimity, right? Where like I can guide and offer assistance, but maybe it's not, you know, loaded with all this shame and fear. So all of that to say, you know, I'm really grateful for the fact that PPMD gave you guys this platform. Thank you, Colin, so much, because you're just a rock star, right? Like, this is really important. And, you know, it's a fun way to spend the day. So get comfortable with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Super good.
Well
Agreed.
said.
Maybe we'll choose from this side while you guys are rolling up.
Okay.
Were you standing in line?
Thank you for today's presentations. They've been really, really helpful. I am a mom of 2 affected boys, and we live in Houston, Texas. And I'm wondering, with at least in the state of Texas, with certain hormone therapies that are not widely available anymore for for adolescents and others. I'm wondering how, if any, what the impact is on endocrinology and in sort of the Duchenne space, and if that's something we need to be concerned about, our children having access to testosterone or other gender-affirming care. Thank you.
Great question.
Dr. Weber.
Yeah, it's a great question. So having luckily to practice in a state where we've not faced those challenges, this has not come up. To my knowledge, there aren't any current or pending legislation or other things that will affect testosterone availability for use in children. I think the larger challenge is for those kids who are struggling with gender identity and looking for transgender treatment. I don't know, Dr. Renthal or Dr. Truba, do you have any specific Texas information?
I don't honestly know much about the Texas laws with regard to that.
I think it would be great in the future if we had an endocrinologist from Texas on our panel. I think that if you're looking to advocate in that space, certainly there are families that would welcome the support. I'm an endocrinologist that believes in gender-affirming care for adolescents. So I advocate in that area. And what we're talking about today is gender-affirming care. It's in that spectrum. I don't see that there's been anything, though, any attacks in our nation on gender-affirming care with cisgender adolescents.
Hi, thank you very much. Connor has given me permission to make a comment and to ask a question.
Thanks,
and
Connor.
he's my support person here. The first comment I wanted to make, I know we talked about with the delays in puberty of making a lot of our children with Duchenne, smaller in size. Another thing, and I talked to another family here, their son had experienced this, but not only that is that Connor's experience being referred to, because we live in South Carolina, as ma'am. And so we've had a lot of experience with that. He identifies as male, but he is being referred to as a female quite often, especially now that he's at the community college. So I just wanted to add that comment in there. Second, the question we had isn't necessarily testosterone, but we were just recently the endocrinologist, and she wanted us to ask about biphosphonates, and I wondered if that's okay to ask that question.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Her question was, we had gone through the 2 years or 3 years of treatment with the every 6-month infusion, and his bone density has not improved. Her question was, what does the literature say about maybe trying it again, the risks versus benefits?
Yeah, great question. How old is Connor?
18.
18, okay, perfect. So there's a couple different options out there the doctor could consider. So number one, there isn't a lot of literature, unfortunately, to guide us. So we're really using kind of like experts' opinion here. One thing they may want to consider is switching to a different type of medicine called an anabolic bone therapy. So there's a medication called teriparatide that works differently than bisphosphonates. There's one paper out of the Cincinnati group that has shown that it seems to be safe and seems to have some benefits in small numbers of adolescents and young men with Duchenne. I've been using that more and more frequently in my older patients around Connor's age, and it just works differently, and you may see some benefit there. Another thing I would say is you don't necessarily need to rely on bone density as the most important outcome. Really, we're interested in fractures and looking at the spine, looking for compression fractures or any of the weakness in the backbones. And so if you're not having those, even if the bone density isn't improving, I think that's still a sign that the medicine is working. I think most patients with Duchenne will need to stay on some sort of bone protective therapy like a bisphosphonate or an anabolic, as long as they're on steroids, certainly. So I think likely, finding a regimen that works and staying on it is going to be helpful, even if you're not seeing those increases necessarily in the bone density.
Great. And I guess the second question is, are there options with, just because where we are, she's not working within the Duchenne community, like to do a consult with you just to, get advice, to help go back to the doctor? Or do you think it's just better that we kind of let her know the information you just provided?
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to connect with you. If you got my email, if you took a picture of that, or I can share it with you afterwards, and we can talk more. So yeah, certainly have done a lot of those types of second opinion type things and help develop care plans for people to work with their local team. So I'd be happy to do so.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes, you bet.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's also important to bring it back to the conversation about testosterone. That's another anabolic agent for bone that we have. So, talk about building bones and affirming your gender identity. It's a combo drug. Yes, please.
Thank you. I also wanted to say thank you so much. Appreciate your story, Colin. Really super helpful, all of you. We have had my son on testosterone for a little bit of a different story. I had to convince the endocrinologist to test him because he actually had a lot of facial hair and he looked like he was going through puberty, but I think he was in the hundreds. Like the endocrinologist just could not believe that his testosterone was so low when he presented like he did. And so that wasn't really a question, just a little information for parents. My question is we've been doing the androgel, and I really wanted to give something else a try because it does make his skin so dry. He's on so much. We do it on the belly, on the shoulders. I just feel like we've got cream everywhere. And so it's kind of a twofold question. Can I put it anywhere else to give these areas a chance to moisturize? Or Colin had mentioned he had done shots and that the medicine kind of varied in strength. Is that pretty typical? Is it worth giving it a shot? I don't think I would be very excited to have or my son would want the hormone levels to be going like this. If it happens in most cases, I probably would stick with haven't tried the patch yet, but
Let me turn that over to Dr. Weber. You have a lot of
is it
experience
really
with many
common that
different
you have patch
For sure.
issues?
I think all great questions. I want to just touch on that first point, which I think is important. So the steroids themselves, the deflazacort and the prednisone, can cause some of that hair growth, even in the pubic area and under the armpit area and some facial hair. So it is important to remember that we're really not looking at facial and body hair, but looking at the testicles and the testosterone levels to make those decisions. Second thing I just want to mention on that too is I think some guys with Duchenne's on steroids will start puberty, but their testosterone levels won't ever get up into a range where we really still feel puberty. And so that's more of a relative deficiency, and I think testosterone is still helpful there. And then to your point, certainly there are some people who the gels do cause those sort of side effects, and it's not the best option. I would suggest trying injections. So I think that's still how we treat most of our patients. Some people absolutely have some of those mood swings with the spikes of testosterone. Others don't. What you can actually do also is you can give a smaller injection under the skin called a subcutaneous injection every week, and that really limits some of those fluctuations up and down. So it's a smaller dose, and so you get less peaks and less valleys, and that's something we've been doing more frequently as well. So I think I would probably try to go with injections as your next approach. How old's your son? I missed that.
He's 26.
Oh, 26, okay. So then the other options, the pills would be an option for him, the patches and these implants. So for those over 18, there's actually much more in the way of options out there. And this endocrinologist, does he see an adult endocrinologist or?
He's a pediatric endocrinologist, so maybe he doesn't deal with this stuff. So
Yeah,
maybe
it may be a good time to find an adult endocrinologist because they will have more experience with these adult regimens. We're sort of limited in pediatrics because they're not approved by the FDA, these other formulations for use in children, and they tend to be more expensive than the injections, so it can be hard to get approval for them. But so we have had good luck with the pills in our, not necessarily the Duchenne population, but other young adults that we see, so that could be a good option for him as well.
Okay, I definitely will do that. It could take a few weeks, as things go with medicine. Is there any other places that you put the gel in the meantime?
No, I really haven't, no.
This is where it has to be.
Here. You can do top of the
legs?
You can do top of the legs, thighs. You can do top of the butt.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not doing that. So, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Colin, you have first-hand experience, I guess.
Yeah, one thing to add to that is when I do it, typically rotate locations. So usually do chest and
he takes 3 packets, so it's like 1 packet here, 1 packet here, 1 packet here. We used to be rotating when he just had 1 packet. It was like here. But then it was 2. Now it's 3. So having more locations, like you said, to rotate would be really helpful.
Yeah. I've
Top
only
of the back.
always done the single packet, so I don't have experience with that, but I can understand the difficulty there.
Those larger volumes, but certainly, thighs, and you can use the
Lower back
as well. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good questions. How about this side?
Is it okay to put an anti-itch cream on to help with any kind of cream
Skin
to
irritation?
help with the drying out?
I wouldn't do it not directly after doing it.
No.
I would do it potentially later, like 12 hours maybe off. I think it could potentially affect how well the medicine is absorbed.
Yeah. So I usually do the gel application right before bed, and then usually put on cream like after a shower.
Yeah.
So that's definitely 12 hours.
So you could do a morning and a night kind of regimen kind of thing. Yeah.
Are you seeing supply chain issues with the testosterone? We specifically have to keep changing from pharmacy to pharmacy, trying to get what we need. I don't know if...
Yes, like almost every medicine. So there's different formulations. Do you use the injections or do you use the...
I'm Colin's mom, the gel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have said that.
So unfortunately the answer is yes, we see supply chain problems with all of the different preparations. I really think that most of the testosterone preparations are somewhat interchangeable. The doses are slightly different, so I think it's just working to figure out what's in stock and then speaking with the endocrinologist to make sure that if there's a dose equivalence change. But yes.
One more on this side. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. I just had a question on, do we have any guidance on like the progression of when we need to get more aggressive? Like with my son, he's 15, we did like 6 month shots and then waited 6 months to see if something would happen, and it didn't, and now we have started shots again once a month. Like, is there some data or guidance on when you need to get more aggressive, age or TSH level or any?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Is your son on a daily steroid?
Yes.
Yep. So I think my experience, and this is my experience, again, no data, so I'm going to share my experience. I don't think that the boys with Duchenne on steroids are going to go into puberty with 6 months of therapy. That is something that we do a lot of times in children not on steroids who have delayed puberty, with the idea that we can sort of mature that part of the brain, the pituitary, but I just don't think it works usually in Duchenne. So I think what your endocrinologist needs to do is treat the puberty just like other conditions where boys or girls don't go into puberty. And so what that means is slowly increasing the dose of the testosterone every 6 months or so, with the idea that over about 2 years you get those levels up into the typical adult male range.
Yeah, I'd say to add to that, I've had experience with doing the holidays, trying to see if my body would take over on its own. Unfortunately, not. It seems to be in my case, so I'm probably indefinitely on testosterone therapy as long as I'm on steroids.
Thank you so much.
And I think sometimes doctors are a little bit nervous about testosterone, even endocrinologists. So I think, just sort of emphasizing that, it's okay, And then another thing that came up that was, I think, a great point here is that the testosterone needs of young men, they vary tremendously. So the dose that one person needs is going to be very different than what someone else needs. 1 packet versus 3 packets, that's all fine. It doesn't mean that there's something, more worrisome about needing more. It's just you need what you need, and then the blood levels and all the questions about mood and libido and all that stuff is going to really help determine, what level your son needs.
Thank you.
You bet.
We have another question over here.
Hi, I'm Richard Schell. I'm the pulmonologist at Nationwide Children's, or one of them. I have a question for Colin, and I was hoping that you could help discuss your experience or how you have been able to talk about this type of topic with your family, with the other physicians. Have you had difficulty having that alone time in the doctor's office? What's your experience with that, and how would you help us as physicians help the other patients that we see also have a better experience in our clinics so that we can give you the time that you need?
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can start. I bet everyone has comments about this. I think my take home, again, really is try to get the patients in to see the endocrinologist at an early age. I think oftentimes we're waiting until they're 15, 16, 17, and it's very complicated then. I think when we can start to meet the families and start having these discussions, because we're not just talking about puberty, we're talking about adrenal insufficiency, we're talking about bone health, we're talking about growth, we're talking about weight gain. There's a lot that we are trying to talk about, and it's not really possible to do all of that in one visit. So I think by meeting the families very early and setting expectations about these are the things that we are going to talk about over time, and then I start talking about it very early. I say, as your son gets older, I'm going to kick you out of the room. We talk together about these puberty exams and the genital exams, and we do them with the families in the room to begin with. But as the boys get older, the expectation is that they are the family's leaving the room. And so I think just building that relationship is so important.
I'm curious, Colin, what's your experience? What do you think?
Well, in my experience, I'm comfortable with usually go to appointments with one of my parents, but I'm comfortable having them in there with those discussions.
Did your providers, were they asking your parents to step out? Did your parents just naturally do that because your parents are awesome and get it? Or how did that work?
Providers haven't really been asked parents to go out. From what I remember. Yeah, that's right. It's just been seeing endocrine for many years now. So, so that's been my experience. Yeah, I know. If you're not comfortable, definitely just talking to guys out there. Definitely don't be afraid to ask your parents. I know it can be hard. Some of you, it's hard for you. Speak without your parents there, but you're comfortable with anything, not just testosterone and sexual health. So.
And I'm just gonna make a plug about, I think for some parents it's uncomfortable to be asked to leave and you wanna know all the things about your kids, and sometimes kids are shy and they don't wanna tell you all the things after, and that is normal and typical and something that all families experience, but families with Duchenne experience it less because we don't allow it, and we keep people in the room, and it is a part of growing up and navigating some of these things, and it is uncomfortable for parents to kind of have to trust that process and trust the physicians and trust your boys to kind of have that conversation, hold that information, and share with you what they want to share with you when they want to share it.
That's awesome. We have 1 minute and 53 seconds. Any final questions?
We're actually kind of at the end.
Such a good discussion today. One last one. Yes.
I think she was here first.
Okay.
No, I just thank you very much. I think those are great talks. And Colin, I was wondering, what Dr. Weber said, that we were all thinking about when should we in the clinic provide a referral to endocrinology. What do you think is a good age to start seeing the endocrinologist if you had to look back at your experience?
I would definitely agree with what Dr. Weber is saying. Start early before. One thing I was going to add and say, fortunately it seems most of the endocrinology providers that are familiar with Duchenne are pediatrics, so I'm wondering how it seems like many adult providers may not be as familiar with it. So I guess I'm actually still seeing a pediatric endocrinologist at 28. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that can be totally fine too. It depends on the way that your hospital works, to be honest. Yeah. And if your provider's doing a good job, which it sounds like they are, keep going with it. Absolutely. One last question.
Wondering if there's a point at which, or what is the point at which the growth hormone becomes pointless when you're taking testosterone?
Yeah, when your growth plates are closed, your bones can't grow anymore.
So it's just for bone growth, there's no additional value beyond just that.
That's a big topic that we could have a separate seminar.
We could have a whole other panel about that.
It's a great question. So I think we don't know is the answer. So potentially there's some benefit. We talked about how testosterone is anabolic to bones. Growth hormone we also think of as being anabolic. And this really we're thinking about during childhood when the bones are still growing and developing. I do not think that most adults with Duchenne are on steroids. I think they're probably still making enough growth hormone that they don't fall into what we would call the adult growth hormone deficiency area. I don't know this, it's not been studied systemically, but just looking at levels of growth factors in some older patients on steroids I've seen. So I think it would be pretty unusual that someone on steroids would need to take growth hormone as an adult, because our bodies just need much less growth hormone in that stage of life. And so I don't think there's likely to be much benefit, if any benefit at all in that population. But in the younger boys and girls with the growth plates still open, potentially some benefit. I think part of it is weighing, are there any side effects to that treatment that are going on? What's the burden of taking those injections?
Mm-hmm. If I could just briefly speak to that, I did the growth hormone. after his daily injections can, it ended up being a lot for me, but also psychologically, as I kind of being mature about it, thinking height really really doesn't matter in the end. Being in a wheelchair, people obviously don't really notice your height. So just I mean, I guess there is kind of a natural bias that you should be taller, but actually kind of thinking from a caregiver perspective almost, if you're doing the growth hormone, getting taller or larger might actually be harder for caregivers to handle you. So thinking more in a practical respect there, because height is not, in the end, not crucial to your health, but obviously everyone's different.
I'm glad that Colin had the last word and that the last words were everyone's different, and I think that's a good theme. Thank you all for being here. Fabulous panel, wonderful experts. I really appreciate the opportunity. So one more round of applause. Thank you.